education has always been central to the Black freedom struggle. In the 20th century, because Southern states and local state governments underfunded Black education, African Americans are double taxing themselves, joining forces, pooling resources, having fundraisers to create opportunities for Black children to learn.
At the heart of this story are two men who reach across divides of race, religion, and region, and fundamentally change this country. And I think for everybody marching in the streets for social justice and progressive change in America, this story speaks to them. Booker T. Washington, born to slavery in Virginia, goes to Hampton College, becomes an educator, and is the founding principal of the historically Black college in Tuskegee, Alabama, originally known as Tuskegee Institute. Julius Rosenwald is born to Jewish immigrants who had fled religious persecution in Germany. And he rises to become the president of Sears Roebuck and Company. These two men meet in 1911 in one of the earliest collaborations between African Americans and Jews in progressive civic causes. They create this program that becomes known as Rosenwald Schools. And from 1912 to 1937, the program builds 4,978 schools across 15 southern and border states, and the results are transformative. But it remains hidden history, and its scope and sweep is largely unknown.
My name is Marion Coleman. I lived here in Casper, Georgia all my life. I was born and raised here, and this was my school when I attended in the early 1950s. It was a time of segregation, very poor conditions, and the teachers were not paid. They didn't have the finances that they needed to get supplies for the children to help them educate them. The buildings that they had school in was either army barracks, a large hall, and mostly church buildings, but a lot of them had to be condemned. The conditions under which they had to come to school was very poor during that time. I just remember a lot of things that my parents did during fundraiser times to raise money. I know my granddaddy, he had a cotton field. We picked cotton, berries, whatever we could sell to raise money to have the school built. We had a lot of cooperation between the parents, the teachers, the neighbors, everybody. They would say that it took a community to raise a child. Every child in the community was important. When the school was built, That was like a pride. You know, the community had pride in the school because they had a part in it.
This is an African-American community already being taxed to pay for white schools who had to dig deep to pay for this school. They fought and they strove and they did what they could to make a better life for their children, because in their eyes, education was liberation. There are two economists from the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago who have done 5 studies of Rosenwald schools. And what their data shows is that prior to World War I, there was a large and persistent black-white education gap in the South. That gap closes precipitously between World War I and World War II, and the single greatest driver of that achievement is Rosenwald schools.
I had some great teachers that influenced us to move forward and to take on dreams. Whatever we wanted to be, we could do it.
In addition, many of the leaders and foot soldiers of the civil rights movement to come through these schools. Medgar Evers, Maya Angelou, multiple members of the Little Rock Nine who integrate Little Rock Central High, and Congressman John Lewis all went to Rosenwald schools. Of the original 4,978 schools, only about 500 survive. And only about half of those have been restored. These spaces are the locus of history and memory in a community. And when we lose spaces like this, we lose a piece of the American soul.
Education shapes our nation, it shapes our world. I'm a firm believer that we should keep this type of information alive for the future generations so that they too would know the struggles and the hardships that it took our people to survive, and keep them motivated to do the same. Not to give up. They weren't people that would give up easy. They fought for what they wanted and what was right. And they're still doing it today. We're still fighting for what we believe is right.